Chapter 2. Welcome to Greencoast. A sharp knock at the door interrupted Braun's task of buckling his leather boots, the final part of his makeshift attire for his duties as Sheriff of Greencoast. He knew who it was and took his time to answer, since an early knock was usually a bad omen for the rest of the day. The wood entrance to his home creaked loudly as he swung it open while adjusting his leather belt, knowing he'd need to be ready to go once he saw the look on his deputy's face. "What's the emergency, Ordell?"
"Ella's boy, Davis."
Braun nodded briefly as he ran a hand over his smooth, bald, ebony head, feeling how close he got his morning shave. Scanning over his deputy's appearance briefly, he wished the younger man took the position more seriously if he hoped to one day take over sheriff duties. Ordell was a good 30 pounds overweight and rarely kept a clean shave or tidy clothing, but then again it was hard to find proper help in smaller villages like this one. "What's happened to Davis? Doesn't he usually help his mother at the tavern? Did a fight break out or something there?"
"No. She sent him out for wood this morning, and he was attacked,"
Ordell replied. "Attacked by what?"
"An elf,"
Ordell snapped back with excitement. Braun looked at his deputy with doubt and dismay. "An elf? This far from the cursed forest? How do we know of it? If Davis encountered an elf, who saw it?" Braun asked, doubt evident on his brow.
"They rode into town together on a horse. Davis was screaming about him. Me and the boys ran up and helped Davis off the horse, then took the cannibal into custody. He's sitting in the cell now," Ordell blabbered excitedly.
Braun could only blink a few times, processing all the information that had been dumped on him as he strode out of his house, closing the door behind him. So, this elf rode into town on a horse with Davis?
"No, Davis was on the horse alone. Looks like his ankle had been wounded, then bandaged."
"Right. So this elf wounded Davis, then bandaged him, and took him back to town before eating him?" Braun asked, trying to guide Ordell to the silliness of his assumptions.
"Well, maybe he was already full from eating another traveler?"
And figured since he wasn't hungry, he might as well help an injured boy back home. The two walked quickly to the town's jail that was mostly used to house drunks from the visiting ships throughout the week. Braun paused in his haste at the sight of a large cat stretched lazily on the porch of the jailhouse, its fur glistening under the sun as it chewed on something stuck within its paw. "What the hell is that?" Braun asked as he cautiously climbed the steps.
"She arrived with Davis and the cannibal. He simply told her to wait for him outside, and she has. I don't know, he said she wouldn't hurt us."
Braun turned on his deputy, his frustration finally showing. "He tended to Davis's wounds, led him back here on a horse that Davis obviously didn't ride out on, and there's a huge cat waiting patiently outside for him. What exactly makes you think he's a feral flesh-eater?"
"'Cause he's an elf? And the horse disappeared. After he got Davis off the horse and the elf into custody, we haven't been able to find the steed he rode in on," Ordell answered succinctly.
Braun rolled his eyes, then threw open the door to the jailhouse, stomping in to end the conversation. In a corner cell, Ezekiel rested casually on a bed, his hands placed above his stomach. His tailcoat was folded neatly over a chair, while his shoes were removed and freshly polished on the floor. The cell itself was unnaturally clean, with even the sheets looking recently washed and pressed. Braun looked the cell up and down in confusion at the general condition, its appearance vastly different when compared to the other cells in the jailhouse. "Did you clean up?" "If I'm to reside here for a prolonged period of time, I'd rather sleep in comfortable accommodations. The smell and grime were immediately off-putting," Ezekiel answered matter-of-factly as he rose from his bed. "The sheriff, I presume." "You presume correctly, sir. Sheriff Braun of Greencoast. And your name would be?" "Ezekiel Graystone." Braun looked Ezekiel up and down, taking note of his clothing and overall demeanor. "Former military, I take it?" Ezekiel raised an impressed eyebrow. "I once went by Colonel Graystone, but that was a very long time ago." "I'd say so. You have the bearing of someone who served and is used to dealing with authority, but your jacket isn't from any standing militia I'm familiar with. Either you were in the military somewhere very far away, or—" "A long, long time ago," Ezekiel finished. "So, you are an elf then?" Yes, a moon elf. A fact that apparently has raised great concern amongst your citizens. A moon elf? Braun asked quizzically, caught off guard for the first time. Ah, I see. It must have been a while since anyone from the continent has seen or interacted with anything but the forlorn high elves. Well, I don't know about the forlorn part, but you know they're cursed, bound to their forest, and they eat the flesh of any creature that strays within their borders, man or beast, right? Yes, unfortunately I'm very familiar with that fact, Sheriff. Braun took another moment to look Ezekiel up and down, taking stock of him. So, that curse or whatever happened to them, it didn't affect the moon elves? No, though a different fate befell them. But not you. Standing from the bed and sighing heavily, Ezekiel turned to the sheriff with a wary look. Sheriff, detailing my sordid history wasn't immediately on my agenda this morning. Now, is there anything specific you're looking for that will convince you I'm not going to eat anyone in this town? Fishing a key from out of his coat pocket, Braun unlocked the door to the cell and swung it open, stepping aside for Ezekiel to exit his confinement. I already knew you weren't going to eat anyone just based off the details my deputy provided. I'm not worried too much what you're going to do while here, simply because you went out of your way to help the Davis boy. I'm more worried about what trouble you might bring with you, though, Braun admitted. That, I suppose, I cannot fault you for. Would you be opposed to me remaining in your village for a few weeks? What for? Most travelers are either coming or going. We don't get many who stick around long. I'm looking for someone, Ezekiel explained as he finished putting on his leather shoes before donning his jacket. Someone who? My brother. His name is Zeldrin. The sheriff laughed and plopped down on a stool outside the cells, momentarily taken aback at the absurdity. If we're this spooked at the presence of a moon elf, wouldn't that indicate we likely haven't seen another pass through the village in a lifetime? Braun reasoned. A sound deduction, and one I've taken into great consideration. Regardless, there are many vessels that pass through this town, as you already mentioned. I simply wish time to question the sailors and travelers of those vessels to see if any of them have seen my brother. A lifetime ago he had a great love of the sea and sailed for many decades. There's a chance he might be doing so again, and would be recognizable to other sailors who've encountered him before. The sheriff nodded, finally understanding Ezekiel's purpose in the town. Braun stood up again, adjusting his belt and sword at his waist. Family is important, especially when there aren't as many of you to go around anymore. Sure, you can stay in the town, though I won't promise that only a few eyebrows will be raised as you walk around the village. If anything gets serious, send them my way. Understood, Sheriff, and thank you for your consideration. Ezekiel exited the cell and started for the door, but Braun suddenly grabbed his wrist and held him firmly there. One more thing, before we both leave this building. The boy was rumored to ride in on a horse that is no longer here, and your cell is clean despite you only having a jacket on your back. Now, I'm not making any accusations, but if you were to wield any kind of magic, I'd advise you keep it to yourself and don't use it openly. Magic, specifically those who practice it, can find themselves on the wrong side of the Inquisitors, and the poorer folks here are eager to earn some coin by leaking info to the wrong people. Ezekiel could see the grimness in Braun's eyes and the seriousness of his tone. Adjusting his jacket, Ezekiel nodded appreciatively to the sheriff. Thank you, sir. Your understanding in these perilous times is greatly appreciated. Braun opened the door for Ezekiel to reveal Ordell cautiously petting Onyx, who purred pleasantly under his attention.
Sheriff, her fur, it's...
I'm assuming this is your pet, Braun asked Ezekiel. Pet isn't exactly the nature of our relationship. She's a friend and a companion, Ezekiel explained as Onyx rose from her lounging position in front of the jailhouse. Well, she's your responsibility as well. She does anything to risk the town, you get kicked out with her. Understood, Sheriff, and again, thank you. One last favor, if it isn't too much to ask. Can you point me in the direction of the Firefly Tavern? Take the road up north, just top of the hill. Hard to miss it. Nodding in gratitude, Ezekiel took off with Onyx following close behind. His casual stroll through the town elicited more than a few curious glances from the villagers, but no one outwardly objected to his release or presence in the village. Ezekiel had experienced his fair share of xenophobia from human settlements, but as Davis explained to him already, Greencoast was a port town and saw visitors stranger than him on a semi-regular basis. It didn't take long for Ezekiel to find the tavern, with a large wooden sign swinging above the doors featuring a glowing bug dancing above a pint of ale. "Wait out here for now. I'm likely due an earful from the mother, and I don't want to wear out a welcome we don't have yet," Ezekiel said to Onyx, looking down at his friend. She yawned, her fangs glistening under the midday sun, as she found another comfy spot under the awning to stretch out under. Taking a breath at the door, steeling himself for a lecture, Ezekiel swung the wooden entrance open and stepped into the tavern. It was a well-lit place with dark polished wooden floors and lighter accents towards the ceiling. It smelled of oil and ale, typical of such establishments.
"You!"
The accusatory tone was loud and forced Ezekiel to wince, bracing himself for the onslaught.
"Thank you. Thank you for saving my boy,"
the woman yelled as she closed the distance between them, throwing her arms around Ezekiel in a warm embrace. Her white blouse was stained from a day spent cooking, and her long hair was in a messy bun that had been redone over and over out of worry. Not accustomed or comfortable with such displays of emotion, Ezekiel simply stood awkwardly in place, his arms by his sides as the human woman squeezed him tightly.
"I'm so sorry, sir. Mr. Graystone,"
the woman said as she broke the embrace, her face telling of the tears that she had been shedding earlier in the day. A pleasure to meet you, miss."
"Ella. You can call me Ella."
"Of course. And I'm afraid I'm not sure why you're thanking me or apologizing."
"My son. He told me everything. Straying too far into the woods and getting attacked by those creatures. He said he wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for you and your cat, Onyx. Where is she, by the way? I saved a fresh shoulder slab from the butcher this morning for her."
"Oh, I'm sure she'd love that." Ezekiel opened the door to the tavern and gave Onyx a nod. Rising lazily, she strode into the tavern, her pace quickening as she smelled the fresh meat on a platter in front of the hearth. Taking to it with vigor, she sat, devouring the meal. "Well, I was happy to help your son. I was on the way to Greencoast anyway, and I have some experience in dealing with the undead. But I'm still not sure why you're apologizing."
"For getting you arrested, of course. The boy, he's never met an elf before. In fact, none of the townsfolk have. Turns out all those old tales of you all being cannibals was just silliness."
"Ah, well, the stories aren't too exaggerated. The high elves of the Cursed Forest do suffer such an affliction, but I'm a moon elf of the Forgotten Isles. The moon elves befell a different fate during the fall." Ella raised an eyebrow and crooked her head.
"The fall?"
Cursing himself for speaking too freely, Ezekiel attempted to course-correct the conversation. "Your son mentioned something about you possibly having a room and board available for an extended stay. I have coin and would be happy to pay for meals for both myself and Onyx for a few weeks in advance."
"Yes, he mentioned something about that. Don't be silly with your coin. You can stay here for free, of course. It's only right after all the trouble you had to go through on our behalf."
"I appreciate it, really I do. But please, at least let me pay for the room."
"We can discuss the particulars later, Mr. Graystone, but for now, why don't you sit near the warm fire with Onyx, and I'll bring you some lunch. We're serving crab stew, and I baked a few fresh loaves of bread."
Removing his jacket and hanging it off the hook of the adjacent chair while loosening his collar, Ezekiel took a seat near the hearth as offered, relaxing for the first time in a while.
"Would you like a pint with your lunch?"
Ella asked as she strode back to the bar. Thank you, but I don't drink alcohol. But a pot of tea would be greatly appreciated."
"Tea?"
Ella asked, confused. "Ah, I see. In that case, could I bother you for a pot of warm water?" Ella nodded, though unsure of what it was to be used for, as she started preparing the meal and pot for Ezekiel. Reaching far into his jacket, Ezekiel withdrew a leather pouch and a metal tea dipper on a chain. Taking dried leaves from the leather pouch, he packed them into the dipper.
"Where's Scout?"
Ella asked as she placed a platter in front of Ezekiel with the accompanying pot he requested. "Oh, Scout is tethered outside of town," Ezekiel lied, the sheriff's words racing through his head.
"Will he be okay out there? We have a stable here that he's welcome to. Davis mentioned he liked apples."
"Scout will be fine. I'll loosen him later to roam freely, as he prefers." By the way, where is Davis? I hope he's not avoiding me," Ezekiel asked as he dipped his tea leaves into the pot. "No, he's down by the pier to fish with Drez, hoping he can catch something delicious for dinner, but I'm worried we won't have anything to heat it with since he wasn't able to bring any wood back home. I just hope the temperature doesn't drop any further and freeze us in the tavern." "Was that what he was doing in the forest?" "Yes, we're about all out of wood. I used the last of our final cord to warm the hearth and prepare lunch. I could probably talk to Farmer Yellen and see if they could loan me some, but I'd still need to figure out a way to get the wood over here." Ezekiel bobbed the dipper a few times before letting it rest, then took to the meal, his stomach taking over for his rationality. "I'd be happy to see what I could do to assist your wood shortage." Shaking her head, Ella waved him off. "No, Mr. Graystone, that would be asking too much of you, sir." "Of course not. If you're offering both room and board for myself and Onyx, simply gathering some wood is the least we could do for you." "Well, that's most kind, sir, really it is. We have a large box out back for when you get around to it. Anything you gather is greatly appreciated." The door to the tavern creaked open as new visitors arrived, breaking their conversation. "Sorry, sir, duty calls. Here's the key to your room, number 7 upstairs. It's spacious, and there's a soft rug for Onyx to sleep on as well." "Thank you for your hospitality. It's most welcome." Finishing his meal around the same time Onyx finished hers, Ezekiel gathered his jacket and stepped up to the second floor, easily finding his room. It was tidy and well kept, with fresh sheets and new candles on the desk beside the table. Onyx found the rug Ella mentioned and curled herself up. "Homey, though it could use a little more freshening up," Ezekiel mentioned. A flourish of his hand and the muttering of an incantation was followed by a wave of fresh air that swirled around the room. The air rushed over the bed sheets and rug, much to Onyx's annoyance, pulling dirt and grime that wasn't visible to the naked eye, forcing it to flush out the open window. The room was left smelling cleaner and looked nearly new as the surfaces and fabrics all appeared to have gone through a deep cleaning. Onyx arched an eyebrow at Ezekiel while remaining curled up on the rug. "Heard the sheriff's warning, did you?" Ezekiel asked as he saw her glance. The cat snorted in retort, closing her eyes once again. "It's just a simple cleansing spell, nothing more. And before you lecture me, I'm going to summon a cord of wood out back. I'll need you to watch out for me to make sure none of the townsfolk walk by as I do it." Yawning, Onyx stretched lazily as she growled lightly at Ezekiel. "What did you think I was going to do, actually chop wood?" Zeke responded with a smirk. Reaching into his jacket once more, Ezekiel dug his arm around in the endless pocket, fishing for something specific. Finding it, he pulled out a large grimoire and rested it on the reading desk before flipping through the pages. "It's something we practice frequently at the Academia. The conjurers would summon wood while the invokers would light it aflame," he explained as he flipped through the pages, looking for the specific spell. Taking a few minutes to reread the spell that he hadn't used in over 100 years, Zeke finished mouthing the words needed to cast the simple creation spell. Slamming the book closed, he cast a different spell, his hands waving over the grimoire as it unnaturally folded in on itself several times before winking out of existence. "Just in case. If the sheriff's warnings are true, I can't have anyone stumbling on that while we're here, and we might need it if we get arrested again and they take my jacket." Onyx raised an eyebrow yet again at the moon elf. All right, if I get arrested again," Ezekiel corrected himself while rolling his eyes as he stood up to leave the bedroom, leaving none of his personal belongings behind.